We're living in an age where the actions of a few hundred socially anxious people from Silicon Valley are having an outsized impact on the rest of the world. What is arguably the most powerful industry in human history has entered the lives of most people on Earth with openly world-changing ambitions. As the rest of us come to terms with the unprecedented power of the technology industry and scramble to make sense of both the benefits and the unintended consequences, it's worth asking ourselves a little bit more about the cultural values of Silicon Valley and where they come from. As Anil Dash, a popular blogger, tech entrepreneur, and Silicon Valley influencer has said, we fancy ourselves outlaws while we shape laws, and consider ourselves disruptive without sufficient consideration for the people and the institutions we disrupt. Burning Man is an annual event that takes place in Nevada, and that's probably as much as I'm going to say about that. Apparently, a lot of people from Silicon Valley are really into it. So I'm really excited today about the conversation and the panel that we're going to be having. I have only one goal for today's panel, which is that I'm really hoping we can get the words disruptive and rave into the same sentence together. So that's your challenge. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Jodi York at the end over here. Jodi is a researcher and a social impact advisor whose work focuses on how narrative is used to create and constrain progressive social and environmental change by civil society, government, and business. And Jodi, your Twitter profile says you identify as an art enabler and social arsonist, and I think social arsonist is the best job description I've heard of in a really long time. Scarlett is a festival director, multi-expressional artist, and community activator within the alternative festival scene of Melbourne. As the director of the underground party crew Culture Jam, he's passionate about growing a large creative network in Melbourne to build immersive worlds, parody society, and create positive social change. And Tamara DiMattina is a social entrepreneur and PR gun who has embedded the Burning Man ethos into her two brainchildren, Buy Nothing New Month and The New Joneses. And the best description I've heard of you, Tamara, is as someone who does PR for the planet. So maybe Tamara, we'll begin with you. When we say the words Burning Man and Silicon Valley, what does that bring to mind? What does that make you think of?
Well, is that all right for everyone? Loads for me, because I'm not a tech expert. I'm not actually an expert in anything. I am a Burning Man veteran of 5 years, and I had a lot of experience of having an amazing time at Burning Man. You'd be dancing next to someone and you knew that they were some amazing programmer from Silicon Valley, like all the designers, the engineers, the tech guys from Silicon Valley. It shuts down apparently when Burning Man takes over the Nevada desert. So I know that it's full of them, but I have no experience of Silicon Valley myself. But I find it fascinating when I see articles now hitting mainstream media, things like about artificial intelligence or maps. You and I were discussing, there was an article in, was it in Rolling Stone magazine recently, about maps. And this is a group that I first heard talking at Burning Man 12 years ago about using psychedelic drugs for therapy. So they're like neuroscientists. Big Kahuna Burgers were there at Burning Man talking to us about like the serious science behind psychedelics. Like, it's not just this crazy week-long bender. There's real social change, amazing stuff going on. But Gus and I were talking about some of the conversations that happen there, these incredible ideas that incubate at Burning Man, and then 12 years later they're hitting mainstream. So I guess Burning Man and Silicon Valley for me is this incredible intersection of ideas and technology and how our world is being changed, and a lot of that stuff is birthed at Burning Man. And
I mean, would you say it's safe to say that Burning Man has had an influence on your life and the way that you operate and the things that you do?
Massively, yeah. For those of you who don't know, the ethos of Burning Man is to leave no trace, which I think is a wonderful idea, but there's a great hypocrisy of the leave no trace ethos of Burning Man, because we all rock up into the desert. Most of us fly to get there. We buy a shit ton of stuff that, you need to bring all your food, all your water, so you're buying a lot of disposable things. So we're creating a lot of waste. So it's not like we are leaving no trace. We're actually having a massive footprint when we go there. But my projects that came out of a lot of the ideas and the conversations that I was having at Burning Man 12 years ago, my passion projects are, as Gus mentioned, Buy Nothing New Month, which is, it's like FebFast or Dry July, but it's for wasteful consumption. So people take the month of October, they buy nothing new. You know, the fact is we live on a planet, we have finite resources and we're consuming infinitely. We are fucking over our planet. So with Buy Nothing New Month, that's very much the ethos of Burning Man, of leave no trace, try to tread lightly. And the other concept that is my whole business is very much leave no trace as well. It's called The New Joneses, and it's a pop-up house. It's an installation. We show people how to live a lifestyle that's fantastic, creative, beautiful, socially minded, but has a very light footprint on the planet. And so my whole business, everything that I do, every reason I get up and go to work is born out of, you know, the conversations that I had at Burning Man, because it did change my life. I was working for a PR agency in the day when I first went to Burning Man. I was having this amazing time in the desert, crazy costumes, just meeting brilliant people, having incredible discussions and just having the time of my life. And then my boss at the time, her face came into my vision, and I just went, shit, I've got to quit that job. So I went home and I quit the job just based on this incredible sort of life-changing experience of what the world could be. And my job and my boss at the time were not facilitating that, shall we say.
Great, thanks. Mick, Burning Man, it bills itself as a transformational festival, and I wonder what those words, transformational festival, I suppose mean for you, or festivals more generally as a vehicle for social change.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a totally valid word to use for festivals like Burning Man and a lot of festivals in general. On a personal level, I'd say I've done most of my growth as a human being at festivals, spiritually, personally, challenges, insight to what I want to do in the world. I mean, what I do is throw festivals, so it's relevant, but that wasn't always my vision. I do genuinely think there's spaces where you have a clean slate, where you're not bound by rules that you are normally. You don't have as much pressure, things like advertising, and within that you can explore new parts of yourself, and I think you can go a lot wider. In terms of social change, yeah, I truly believe festivals can be a vessel for social change. It's what I'm interested in doing with my festivals. And there's two ways of looking at that. There's change within the festival. If you provide a really amazing, artistic, engaging environment, people learn about themselves, they learn how to let go, they have personal change, and they take that back to the real world. I think that's beautiful, and I just did a festival 2 weeks ago, and I really felt proud of what we did there in that respect. But then on another level, I think that's a stepping stone to actually you need to take a step further to make real change. Whether that's donating money to charity, to engaging communities who really need it, to realising what it is that happens at festivals and how can you really implement that back to society, not just within the festival. Not everyone can go to Burning Man. I've never gone to Burning Man, honestly, because I can't afford it. So there's a gap there. And I think, you know, part of me gets cynical about that, but I also think there's a massive opportunity for these festivals, especially when they have 60,000 people and $33 million budgets, to make serious social change.
So, I mean, when you think about Burning Man, I mean, that has a connotation and an idea for you as well, and I'm sure that the word Silicon Valley does as well. Do you think that a big festival like Burning Man, and what you've heard about it as an outsider, is a valid way of making change in the world? And do you think that it's a good place for the elite of the world? Do you think it's a good place for them to be playing in, a good playground for them?
For sure, yeah, definitely. I think it's an awesome starting ground. And I think one of the good things about Burning Man is it's got an ethos, it's got 10 principles. So when Burning Man started, does anyone know if the principles were there from the start?
No, they weren't. They got started in about 2003.
Cool, because it looked a lot more anarchistic at the start.
And the principles were actually kind of emergent. You know, it was let's put some words around what we're doing. What is this thing that we're doing?
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely vital for these spaces, to have a clear ethos that permeates through every single part of the event. And yeah, Burning Man in its early days, was it true there were like guns out there and it was a bit more like...
Absolutely.
Yeah, it looked really, really wild. And then I believe in...
Drive-by firing range. I'm not making that up.
Drive-by firing range. And in 95, there were a few deaths. Mm-hmm. 95 or 96. There were always deaths. There were always deaths. So it got to a point where it's like we need to, both from an ethos and from an organisational level up. And I think what it achieves there, yeah, it looks so valuable, especially on a personal level, but I think there's some contradictions within the model still, and I think they need to tweak their ethos a little more, and things like carbon offset and helping people in the world who really need it. Like, if that jump doesn't happen, I'm going to remain very cynical on Burning Man.
So I want to come back to this idea of the connection between Burning Man and Silicon Valley. And Jodi, it's interesting hearing Mick talk about the principles and saying that Burning Man it's okay because it's got a set of principles and an ethos and value system embedded into it. I imagine that the same could not be said for the tech industry. The tech industry is 25 years old in its modern form. It's had a massive influence very quickly, and yet there's no code of conduct or professional association to insist that we're doing things the right way. Do you think why is it that something like Burning Man, for example, seems to have an ethos and a value system embedded into it, whereas the tech industry still feels a lot like the Wild West, even though it's having an outside influence on the rest of us?
Ooh, that is a great question. Okay, so I would say a couple things there. One, Burning Man and the people involved in Burning Man from the get-go were quite interested with experimenting with culture explicitly. And so there was space for an encouragement of actually reflecting, kind of philosophizing about what the hell is this thing that we're doing? We've been at it for a while. What just happened for the last, sort of 5 years? And what do we want to actually take forward? So, I think there's less space in commercial endeavors for reflecting not just on the business model of what it is we do, what's our service offering, et cetera, but what are we really creating in the world? What kind of world do we want to live in? And is it one where we're primarily interested in shareholder profit or the cult of the founder? When you go to conferences in San Francisco, you see people with just T-shirts that just say founder. So I think that's one of the important differences, and I think one of the reasons that people in the tech industry are drawn to Burning Man is it's a place where there's a lot of creativity and a lot of play, but also a bit of a container for meaning. I don't even want to say there's meaning there, because meaning is just what you ascribe to it, but some architecture on which to build personal meaning and test ideas.
Yeah. You said, there's a video of you actually, Jodi, from 2013, I think, where you talked about John, the 24-year-old software engineer that you met at a burn, and you said that he was a bit of an introvert and a classical pianist, and apparently he told you at some point during the festival that he said to you, "I've experienced so many things this week that I didn't know were possible, and now I don't know what to do with that. I know I'll never be the same, but I don't know who I will be." And I wonder if you could just speak a bit more. About that
was a beautiful night. That was actually at the effigy burn. I was camped with this guy that I hadn't met before. There were a bunch of people in my camp, and so he was a software engineer, like you just said, a little bit introverted, and was partying it up and having an amazing time and coming in at all hours or not coming in at all, and so I happened to be sitting next to him, and he was just watching things burn and just like tears streaming down his face, and so I checked in with him, and he was like, "Well, this is like, I feel profoundly changed, and I actually don't know what to do with that." So I kept in contact with him for the next kind of 6 or 8 months, and this is part of what I do for Burning Man. I'm the regional contact for Burning Man here in Victoria, and it's a kind of a hospitality and connection job, basically. So he's like, "Well, I want to bring, what people have told me is not to sort of replicate other people's gifts, but to understand what your own gift is and bring that." And so I connected him with the art car DMV, with builders. He's like, "I don't even understand how I would go about doing anything," but he wanted to build a jazz bar out in the Deep Playa and just sit out there and play piano and serve nice cocktails. And I believe he's actually done that about 2 years later.
Right.
So we've never built anything.
Yeah, so it's an inspiration, a place for inspiration for him. Tamara, why are we sitting here talking about some event in Nevada and talking about people in California, in the Bay Area, in Melbourne. I mean, do you think this conversation... It's interesting that this conversation is taking place here in Melbourne. I mean, Burning Man has obviously had relevance for you in your personal life. But do you think the conversation around what that place is, a conversation around places of inspiration or countercultural movements, has relevance for us here in the city?
Sure. I mean, has everyone here heard of Google? Put your hand up. Like, those guys apparently came up with that concept at Burning Man. You do just, it's a different place, Burning Man. And I'm full disclosure, I don't think I've been for... I went 5 years in a row, and I don't think I've been for 10 years, and it changes so much. So my Burning Man is not what it would be now, and the same, people could say that for Burning Man of 20 years ago. But as I was saying before, it really is this extraordinary place that just doesn't exist. I've never found anything like it anywhere else in the world. And I used to get really sad at the end of the week. I'd cry as we were driving away, because I'm like, this just does not exist. I can't find this anywhere for another year. And it was just this sort of heartbreaking moment of this wonderful place. And of course, bad stuff happens there too. It's not utopia. But it was just an incredibly special place where people go to be just creative, generous. It's just, for me, it was the best of humanity. And the ideas that were discussed, I never heard any conversations like it anywhere. I think life even in Melbourne has changed a lot in this time. But I would go and sit in the middle of the desert hearing people talk about stuff that I'd never was raised, prior to Wheeler Centre, or who I think Seb used to be at Wheeler Centre. We're very lucky now. There's a lot more interesting conversation taking place. But for me, back in the day, it didn't exist anywhere else except for Black Rock City, which is what it's called for that week of the year. So I think it's very relevant. It does change our lives, even, the fact that we all use Google probably how many times a day. And that idea came, was born at Burning Man.
I mean, Mick, why can't we just pick it up and bring it here then? I mean, maybe we should bring it here.
A 60,000 person festival and ship it over. That's very Burning Man, actually. They would honestly try to do that.
I mean, what do we have? Do we need the equivalent here in Melbourne, in Australia? How would something like that look? Does it already exist?
Yeah, I mean, there is Burning Seed, which is our regional burn. Is that the correct terminology? So Burning Seed is... There's a few Australian ones. There's one in Perth too called Blazing Swan. Burning Seed is an amazing event. I've only been there once, and I learnt heaps from it. And same thing, I was a little bit cynical, as I am for Burning Man, but I went there, and the culture, as like Burning Man, is based on gifting. And once you go somewhere and you start giving and taking and just letting go of that, that has honestly made me a more generous person. I'm always trying to be more and more generous and learn how to give more, and that was a huge step in that direction. So that for me was super valuable, but at the same time, it frustrates me a little bit that they've taken so much from Burning Man. I think you need to sit there, and when something's been running for really long, you really need to sit there and you go, what's working about this and what isn't? And if we're going to adopt it, how do we address the things that maybe could be done better? And I don't know how it works. Sometimes with these franchise things, you actually don't have the freedom to do that. You're told this, you have to do this like this. They've got a MOOP thing. MOOP is matter out of place. And for the theme camps, if a theme camp leaves a little bit of rubbish on the ground, they can be shamed online. And I found that, I really didn't like that. And that could very well have just been taken directly from the state. So, as you know, I'm also running festivals myself, which have a lot of similarities to Burning Man. So I feel like there's definitely space for something like this in Melbourne, but it needs to be its own experiment. If we were to sit here now and as a group to come up with a festival, we'd need to all talk about it and be relevant to this culture of this room and engage us all. And if we just were let's do a burn right, it'd be cool. We'd set some things on fire and build some things. But I think it's more valuable to tap in to the culture and build new cultures around what's going on.
But I mean, don't you think that if we're saying that this culture, this thing, the burner movement or the wider festival culture is an influence on the Silicon Valley elite or the startup culture, for example, here in Melbourne, is there a contradiction between a whole bunch of people who are saying we're out here with all these great principles, but then when it comes to their actions in the real world, in the tech world, they're saying, we're rebels, but actually they're robber barons? I mean, is there isn't there a contradiction in that? I mean, are they just telling themselves a story that they want to hear, or do you think that these are genuinely good places for powerful?
Who are they?
The people, the powerful tech elite, both in Silicon Valley and, I suppose, in startup culture around the world.
I'm sure there's examples of both. But yeah, I think it would be very easy to talk about changing the world. I mean, there's something about a place like Burning Man or alternative festivals where your experience is so rich, your heart is so full, that is a change. But yeah, to actually then selflessly take that back to the real world, it's another step. And it does feel like that step sometimes is lacking. I'm sure there's amazing examples of it being passed on and passed on. But yeah, with the tech world, they could definitely do more, and so could the Burning Man organisers, in my opinion. I feel like anyone who has a lot of money behind them should be making social change, and if part of their ethos and part of their principle is we're going to change the world, don't just make apps faster and our ability for rich middle-class people to connect more using technology. Like, put your money where your mouth is and seriously make inspiring real-world change. There are some people doing that, but I see a lot of it lacking in places where it definitely should be happening.
Jodi, what do you think of that?
I'm being really restrained. It's interesting, you know. It's hard to not jump to the defense of something that you really love. No. It's awesome. Can I talk to you about Burners Without Borders?
Yeah.
So, you're not the only person who's had this conversation. Actually, let me talk to you about the Burning Man project. Burning Man was a for-profit organization because that was an easy way to get started. It was lightweight, it was fairly nimble. It's hard to imagine Burning Man being any of those things, but they went through a process of rolling the whole thing into a nonprofit in 2011 under the name the Burning Man Project. Because, you know, for a lot of people, myself included, if it's just about a party in the desert, I'm not in. I'm not in. For me, it's really about taking those values out into the world and really changing, using the connections that you make out there, the ideas you converge out there, that you collide out there, and taking that back out into the world. So some of the things that go on in the Burning Man Project, the kind of things that it's really focused on are civic education and sort of urban renewal, community stuff, art, getting more art, particularly big art, interactive art, playful art into cities. So getting all of those big installations, some of those big installations that you see out on Playa into cities.
That's beautiful. Yeah, because that's something me and my friends have talked about doing when we get bigger, with getting the leftover data and putting it back.
Because people who can't afford to go to your event, or maybe their world doesn't include, I'm the kind of person who goes to festivals and gets crazy. They should have that experience. They should be able to have that experience as well. That was the whole concept behind another art event called Figment, which has popped up in various places in the world, which was very much run on the same kind of Burning Man principles, but it's a one-day city event. But Burners Without Borders, just really quickly, because I don't want to dominate the conversation. In Hurricane Katrina struck in 2004, 4 or 5. The years all run together now. Actually, during Burning Man, I was there that year, and there were a lot of burners from the south on Playa, just absolutely devastated at what was going on, and they said, "Wow, somebody needs. I'm here. I'm all like juiced up with excitement and sense of possibility, and somebody needs to do something. I need to do something. What can I do?" And so they started a humanitarian organization that now works all over the world, including here in Australia.
That's Burners Without Borders.
Burners Without Borders. You can find it on the internet.
And Burning Man's recently just adopted that as an official program, I believe.
So since that is one of the programs of the Burning Man Project, so the Burning Man Project is kind of an umbrella that a lot of those things sit under. But I think I hear your concern that for a lot of people, Burning Man or festival events is something that they do to get loose, when in fact, I kind of want festival events and what we do there to be what actually we then take out into the world. That I think of it as kind of, this is the place where we turn inwards and have a thing with ourselves and our community, so that then we're souped up and can take that outwards and be different in the world.
Just to clarify as well, I'm talking very much about the Burning Man organisers as well. I don't doubt that on a ground level, Burning Man is probably one of the best examples of generosity and giving, and a lot of that would filter back to the real world, but the organisers playing with a lot of money, and they themselves, I was reading a statement from their last annual report, they themselves were like, we're a not-for-profit now. If we're not making more change in the real world, we are morally failing. So they themselves have come out and said that. So it's an interesting turning point. They got a director of philanthropy last year, but I couldn't find any results from that. It happened a year ago, and then a year later it was mentioned again in the annual report. Hey, we got a director of philanthropy, and it's like, cool. What's happening? Like, what are the results of this? And I genuinely hope that this leads to where they're suggesting it will, of making change in the real world. But I don't feel it's there yet.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring the conversation back in again, just to this idea of these links between Burning Man and Silicon Valley, and maybe as a prompt for either three of you, I want to read the quote that the title of this panel came from. So the story of this quote is that Silicon Valley, which is a satirical show run by Mike Judge in LA. It's a great show, if anyone hasn't seen it. At the premiere of that show, they asked Elon Musk what he thought about this show. It's pretty scathing of Silicon Valley. And so Elon Musk's reply was, I really feel like Mike Judge has never been to Burning Man, which is Silicon Valley. If you haven't been, you just don't get it. You could take the craziest LA party and multiply it by 1,000, and it doesn't even get fucking close to what's in Silicon Valley. The show didn't have any of that. The parties in Silicon Valley are amazing because people don't care about how they're perceived socially. Hollywood is a place where people always care what the public will think of them, and it's fucking sad, and the show felt more like that. I've lived in Hollywood for 12 years, and I've never been to a good party. I'm not entirely sure that sounds like someone that I'd want to be partying with. And I wonder, is this just a party for the elite? Or
you wouldn't want to party with Elon Musk. I would love to party with Elon Musk.
And we did say we weren't going to say his name, so he shall not be mentioned. But, I mean, this idea that,
I'm confused, though. Is he saying that Silicon Valley, the place and the show, is shit, and Burning Man is good?
He says that Silicon Valley, the show, is rubbish, and that Silicon Valley, the place, is amazing, and it's got this awesome party called Burning Man, which is, you've just got to come, and then you'll really get it. That doesn't sound like a very democratic approach towards life, and I wonder what you think of that.
But he's saying Burning Man is good.
He's saying Burning Man is great.
Yeah.
And so is Silicon Valley.
Well, as I said before, I can't talk about Silicon Valley, no experience of it, the show or the place. But
I mean, Silicon Valley is responsible for the election of someone, or maybe not, but anyway, we won't get into politics. Technologies have unintended consequences, and Silicon Valley is the place that these technologies are being built, and Burning Man is the place, apparently, that they go to get their inspiration. And I guess that's what is interesting about this particular conversation, for me certainly as well. I mean, do you think that it matters that this is the place that people are going to get their inspiration? And do you think this is a good place for people to get their inspiration?
I think there's a lot of great ethos at Burning Man. I love the idea of you can't buy anything and you can't sell anything, with the exception of ice and, as in frozen water, ice and coffee. I love that there's no advertising there, so your brain is just free. Like, my goodness, for a week you don't see any ads. How wonderful. And I think it's a fabulous place for inspiration. As I said before, there's, humans there just rock up to make you have a good time and be creative as possible and be humorous. The first year I went with one of my best mates. We had no idea what we were going to, and we didn't know anyone had gone. I'd heard about it, and we just kind of loosely, randomly said, let's do it. So we rocked up without costumes. We had an umbrella. And so I ended up making him a costume, like a bikini out of the umbrella. That was our only costume. And we were at a bar that some people had built, obviously put a hell of a lot of effort into. So for those of you who don't know Burning Man, people go to the most extraordinary effort to build the most magnificent art sculptures you've ever seen and that you'll never see in your dreams. It's just extraordinary. And a lot of a lot of the funding from Burning Man goes, my understanding is, at the time when I was going, I think it was 75% or 85% of the money that they raised went out to the people to build these superb art structures.
I believe 4% goes to art right now.
Not when I was there, because I remember looking into that at the time, and it was something like 70% of the purchase price of your ticket went towards the artists. I've no idea what it is now. But Jamie and I rocked up. We brought nothing. We contributed nothing. We literally rocked up in the middle of the desert. We sat at someone's bar that a whole team of people would have discussed this the whole year and brought all their materials to build this beautiful, whatever theme it was. It might have been a vampire theme, I can't remember, or some Bedouin tent theme. They'd put so much effort into it. And all the drinks are free. You literally just rock up at the bar and they're, what can we get you? We didn't know what all this stuff was about and felt so bad that we had brought nothing, and people just made us feel like $1 million because they said, you came all the way from Australia for this, oh my God, and they treated us like royalty. There was none of this sort of what can you do for me thing. It was just the most extraordinary feeling of humanity at its best. So I have had extraordinary, wonderful feelings and experiences of Burning Man, of how good we can be. And as I was talking about the MAPS, these guys earlier, the neuroscientists, all these big brains who are dedicating their whole lives to making the world better, and then they take time out of their very important work to go and talk and share their work and what they're doing. They're not going to pick up a job out of it. They're just, there's a lot of goodwill, and there's a lot of, it's just, for me, it's an amazing melting pot of the best of humanity.
Yeah. Thank you. Nick?
Going back to your original question.
Or what makes for a good party? I mean, Fire Festival, was that a good party?
Yeah, who's familiar with Fire Festival? I got my graphic designer to whip this up because I felt like being a smartass and trolling on a very relevant topic. I'd say Fire Festival is like the perfect balance of Silicon Valley and Burning Man. It's like get a bunch of rich people and put them in a post-apocalyptic environment, whether intentional or accidental. Like, that is a fucking art experiment worth talking about. I just lost my train.
I think that the thing that was the best thing to come out of Fire Festival was to show just how easy it is to lure a whole lot of people to an island and then strand them there, especially if they're rich.
It's super interesting.
Think about what the possibilities of that are.
Festivals are based on ideas, and it is this fabrication. You're like, let's come up with a crazy idea. The first thing I do is get my graphic designer to paint a picture of a world, and then we're like, whoa, that is incredible. Let's create that world. So they created a picture of a really amazing world that they had no ability to pull off. And yeah, it's kind of heartbreaking, to be honest, as a festival organizer. When I first heard of that, it was like, oh, that is heart-wrenching. That is every festival organizer's fear. But there's also a fascination in it for me. Schadenfreude, is that the right word? Schadenfreude. Yeah, there's a bit of that too, which is when you take pleasure in someone else's pain.
I mean, so just jumping a bit more into the idea of Burning Man, I suppose as an avatar for what's happening in wider society, do you think that once an event like that gets that big, and once there is so much money involved and there is so much profile, so much hype, all the big money comes in, do you think it's inevitable that an event like that is going to have to sell out once it gets past a certain size?
Sellout's an interesting word. Sellout to me would entail losing your principles, choosing money over your principles, I guess. So I don't think Burning Man's sold out, but you could argue it's at a tipping point of other cultures coming in and potentially tainting the experience. But when was the last time you went to a burn? When was the last time you went to a burn?
I went last year.
Would you say that on a ground level the experience is still fundamentally rich and amazing?
Well, I mean, I don't think my opinion matters. I'm more interested in knowing what the truth.
It matters more than mine because I've never been to Burning Man.
Jodi, what do you think?
I absolutely think that the future of Burning Man and the whole Burning Man project is actually in the regional events. Because I'm a firm believer in you can burn wherever you are. You can live the culture you want to live wherever you are, rather than flying to the other side of the world. If the best part of your life is flying to the other side of the world with people you are unlikely to see again, you need to reorganize.
That's awesome. I love that. So.
Yeah, I mean, Jodi, you said, I think you've actually said as well, where was it? You said Burning Man is not something that happens in Nevada. It happens all over the world in hundreds of events.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things, for me, one of the really key transformative things, and my life was transformed by Burning Man, and I've probably, had the level of transformation I'm going to get out of it, and what my position in it now is actually kind of helping other people have transformative experiences, because that's awesome. So really, engaging people with their sense of possibility. So this story about the pianist who decided he wanted to make a jazz bar. Through the community is such an interesting cross-section, such an interesting Venn diagram of different kinds of people that you're actually coming together with without the trappings that tell me that you and I are different people and that you and I are different people, and because what I like to say is you never know what your burner friends do when they have their street clothes on. I added street to make that family friendly. So you're able to come together, and everybody's ideas are maybe not equally valid, but equally fun and playful, and do that in a way that's really generative and engaging people with their own sense of possibility. Not that other people build big things, but maybe I build big things. I spend a lot of my life driving spreadsheets, but I also get to wire up pyrotechnics. I also get to, run heavy equipment. That doesn't happen at the University of Melbourne in my daytime life.
But do you think the same thing is true for the tech world more generally? I mean, do you think that this ethos transfers over into the tech world in the way that Elon Musk says is happening? Do you think the Bay Area has that same ethos?
I think that Burning Man and Silicon Valley, co-evolved. So all of that was developing at the same time and feeding into each other. And I get a little nervous actually about people wanting to cargo cult what happens someplace else on the other side of the world, when in fact what we're going to do here in Melbourne, in Victoria, is based on what we've got here, based on the strengths that are here. One of the things that people often don't talk about, they just imagine that Silicon Valley magically has a lot of money and a lot of engineers, and yes, those people have migrated in, but a lot of the reason that they were there in the 80s was defense money. The Defense Department was putting a lot of money into education and research. There was a lot of electronics production in that region. The reason that guys were playing around in the garage with technology is because they had it, and that wasn't an accident. That was a product of a particular history that I don't think we want to replicate.
Can I say something as well? Surely with Silicon Valley, you're going to meet hurdles for your ethos. You're going to go to Burning Man and you're like, I want to change the world. The Silicon Valley, the TV show, if that has any accuracy to it, all they do is they're trying to make change, and they meet hurdle after hurdle and constantly get trampled on. And I imagine you could go to Burning Man and be filled with this inspiration and then be met with very real world constraints, whether it's money or investors trying to sway you. And I think you'd have to have a very, very, very solid internal ethos and moral compass to not get lost in that climate, surely.
I was going to say, do you believe that the tech industry gives a platform for innovation and allows people to, wear what they want and come to work as they want and be creative in what they're doing in their work day? And Burning Man also creates that platform for innovation in the same way. And in the way that the two cultures have evolved, there's a bit of crossover there in the way that they allow innovation in the workplace and in the festival world as well.
I would certainly agree with that. And, the things that people think of as like, oh, that's so California, that's also co-evolved with Burning Man and Silicon Valley and Hollywood. Those places end up being very different than tech centers in New York and Boston, or potentially Melbourne.
One thought I was just thinking on that note is that they're very free. Sorry, I've just got to get the right words for this. I think that the tech world, I'm not going to be able to articulate this. You have to give me a second.
That's okay. Take your time.
Yeah, thanks,
where does innovation come from? Does it come from that permissive mindset that you get in Burning Man, and does the same mindset happen in the tech industry? I suppose that would depend really on where you're talking about. In Google, famously they had 20% of their time allotted to projects that employees were just interested in and that had no potential commercial benefit. But sure enough, those projects, a lot of them ended up turning into big world-changing ideas. But I mean, the same is also true for research, the research world more generally. I mean, traditionally, science was supposed to be funded for scientists and tenured academics to pursue research interests that interested them, as opposed to having a commercial logic or having to have some kind of commercial outcome, which is unfortunately what it is more today. And a lot of those, the ability to pursue their interests or to try experiments that had no commercial benefit, ended up creating fantastic science and amazing technology in academia. So I think that the mindset that you're talking about there, the permissiveness to experiment and to create and to build things and not have a commercial outcome behind them, I think is a mindset that doesn't just have to be in the tech industry. I mean, that's a mindset that we can employ throughout all the sectors of our economy.
I think one of the key concepts, two key concepts, we have concept inflation now, play and passion. Really fostering the kind of divergent thinking that comes out of those, and that shows up in events like yours, Mick, where you sort of set up a container and say, go crazy. What are you going to bring? How is it going to interact with what those other people are bringing?
And that also stops it from being just something that you're consuming. It becomes something that you're a part of.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions?
My name is Uday. I basically have this, if this festival or festival similar to this one are such a hotspot for innovation, shouldn't we take this culture to organizations? And if that's possible, how will such an organization look?
So the question is, if this festival is such a great place for innovation, then why don't we take that festival culture and that mindset and bring it to larger mainstream organizations?
I've got something to say about that. I work by myself, which is a bit of a bummer because I don't get to have cross-collaborations of ideas with people, but some of the things that I've seen at Burning Man that I see replicated with places like NAB or those big Kahuna Burger organisations where they literally rebuild their entire building excuse me, so that people from this department who would never cross paths with a person from that department, they just wouldn't see each other. They'd go up in their elevators here in that department all day, then they'd go up in their elevators here. They've rebuilt their buildings, so they have to walk past each other to get to their desks. That's something that I would see happening really naturally at Burning Man with these amazing ideas and talks that take place. Like in my life, I tend to go to talks that are about my work and the stuff that I'm interested in. At Burning Man, I would go to something about neuroscience or then about bloody whatever, some crazy wacky topic. Every single topic you want to explore is there, and I love that cross-collaboration of ideas and really the melting pot. Yeah.
I think that would be really positive if some of the principles and ideas and things that are happening at Burning Man would be going into large corporations. But at some point they seem to, there's very obvious contradictions there. Like, I think one of the best things that people could learn is gifting. But you're giving away something. There has to be a sacrifice there. So if you've got a place which is interested in making money and you're encouraging a culture of decommodification, it's an extremely obvious clash. And it goes both ways. From what I've seen, Burning Man's taken a lot from the real world in its organisational structure. It started off very chaotic, and it started putting in very common systems that you'd see in normal businesses and societies, and they needed to put that structure in. One thing that I'd really love to see is, that language of gifting going out into the real world. I think it's awesome what you're doing, that you're getting microcosms of it. And I think a step further, would it becoming a language or a meme? And what really fascinates me is that everyone knows Burning Man. It's on talk shows. It's referenced constantly in popular culture, but the gifting thing doesn't seem to be automatically synonymous with it. It's I was thinking it'd be awesome if Paris Hilton came back from Burning Man and she was like, oh my God, like I had the best time, and like I realized like all this corporate stuff I'm doing is like it's a little bit of a waste of time, and I should just like give things away. Like, she's not going to do that because she's got obligations to her sponsors and stuff. But I feel like there's a blockage there, and I actually think technology is the thing that can be best used to get parts of the festival culture and bring them to the real world. Like, I think that's the vessel. And if you start looking at technology very different, instead of just ways to make money on top of innovate, you're like, well, how do we innovate for social change? Like, that to me is like where all the power of that's the real step forward.
I'm dying to say something here. Mick, I'm really glad you said culture. So professionally I'm a sociologist, and I do a lot of work on culture within organizations, culture within communities, and because there is a festival culture, and we recognize it in other people, and people who don't share that culture show up and say, this is different from the thing that I experience normally. So people recognize it. They can't always put their finger on it. But one of the ways in which culture works is it works better when it's shared. So in a sense, it's kind of like inoculating people with an idea. So meme, you said meme, right? So when gifting happens, when there are lots of people with that idea who recognize that there's a level of implied reciprocity, not in a transactional sense, but maybe in a cultural pay it forward, co-create like this generosity with me. Almost. Absolutely. And the more you sort of litter your workplace with people who get those ideas, the more you talk about those ideas, you can actually switch people. The hardest step is often from 0 to 1, right? Getting people tuned into, hey, maybe I could actually do things differently and more intentionally, more mindfully. We have these interactions all day, every day. Is this actually how I want to interact? If I didn't, how would I be supporting and choosing differently? I think that's a really, really important thing that we can then, drive. And that is a form of innovation. That's cultural and social innovation. And I think that's the idea that we can take out into the world and then apply it to lots of different things. There are no rules. That's a lie. There are lots of rules. But there are always alternative choices in how we interact with each other. And you often have to be the person to make the first move and set that up in a different way. And you have to be willing to be rebuffed because people think it's weird. But I think that's part of how we change the world around us, part of how we create the kinds of communities that we actually want to live in.
Hi, my name's Cameron. I'm a 3-year burner. And I'm now in the startup world.
Sorry, a 3D burner?
3-year. I've been
3 years.
3 years.
A 3D burner. I haven't heard of one of those yet.
I understand Burning Man, been to many festivals here too. And obviously the construct of Burning Man, the whimsical environment you're in, obviously that's really fantastic for generating ideas and innovation. My question to you guys is, how can we bring that to Melbourne in terms of the startup culture and the support that we give to people to really encourage that innovation here? I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that.
I think that you need to create a culture which breeds more of the same. So if you create a culture, say, you could use technology, and that technology is based on giving, but then there's a feedback cycle where, like, oh my God, these guys are doing such amazing things. They're throwing these amazing events. They're giving to people who need it. More people want to give to that, and it just becomes a really, really positive cycle. And that's something that I'm personally trying to create in Melbourne. One example that I thought of, for example, if there was like a really cool projection app at a train station, and you can literally like play a game, and it sounds like a cliche example of helping people, but you're feeding a hungry person, for example. That would be really nice because you get to interact with it and feed the hungry person. I think what would really make that something worthwhile is if other people were gifting that experience. So say if it was an online thing and I donated money, then I got to watch someone at the train station have that heartwarming experience. Then for me, you're creating an actual wider culture of giving. You're using technology, and it just seriously creates this positive feedback cycle. And I know with my events, and I imagine with what you do too, you start with this there's money for sure, but then there's also just this culture of sharing and giving. And yeah, I do think technology is an awesome catalyst for that.
Tamara, I mean, you've been involved in the startup scene in Melbourne in different ways, for the last decade or so. I mean, do you think it's possible to bring those ideas into the startup ecosystem and the entrepreneurial space in Melbourne?
I'm a bit weird because people get confused by what I do. As I was describing before, my pop-up house, it's called the New Joneses. I don't make any money from it. I get sponsors. It's a sponsorship model, but I don't sell anything. And so we install this house and we show people every choice we make in our daily lives has an impact. So how do we have a positive impact on our people and our planet with everything we do, from our choice of dunny paper to the choice of bank? You know, choosing a bank that doesn't invest in fossil fuels, massive big deal. I didn't even know what fossil fuels were until I went to Burning Man and saw these incredible art sculptures of people worshipping fossil fuels. But I had a run-in with a guy. I just did my pop-up in Sydney a few weeks ago at a home show, and he came and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, sort of a bit glibly, I said, "I'm just changing the planet." You know, I get sick of talking to the public after the 20,000th person comes up to me. And he was genuinely confused and a bit angry at me because he didn't understand why I would be doing it. He was saying, "What's in it for you?" And I'm like, "I'm literally just trying to make the world a better place." This man and I could not, our brains just didn't intersect. But that's what my world is. Like, I've taken some of those things that I learned at Burning Man. I want us to leave no trace. That is my everyday, as I was saying before. That's what there's a reason I get up every day to create this project, day after day after day. It's been incredibly stressful. I've had been, driven mad by anxiety and panic attacks about what I've been doing, but I finally got to a place where I can do it with a bit more comfort. But so many of the things that I learnt at Burning Man is what I am trying to teach people. I'm teaching, we have kids come through, we're free, we're open to the public, we don't charge anyone. Most of what I do is free, but that's because I'm trying to change the world in the way that I see that I can. I can take my PR and my comms background to try to get people to be more kind, to leave no trace, to give more and all that stuff. So that's what I'm doing, but that's kind of what I'm driven by. We're all different. Not everyone is a burner at heart.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm now distracted because I just want to go and see Tamara's pop-up house. When is it next on?
Well, you can come. We're in Geelong this weekend.
I had something to say on that. It's really interesting the resistance some people seem to have to positive ideas. I was looking at I can't remember the name of it, but there's a company that started a search engine and they plant a tree. I don't know if
Ecosia.
What was the name, sorry?
Ecosia.
So I don't know if it's for every search, but they plant a large number of trees based on their ad revenue, and 80% of their profits goes to planting trees. And it was a sponsored ad, and I guess if you're putting a sponsored ad up, you are forcing your paradigm into people's faces a little bit. But the responses were like seriously just defensive and slamming it down. And some of them had a small amount of validity to it. A lot of it was just like, dude, Google. It's just like, because Google, or like, why change it if it's not broken? And it was just like, such negative resistance, and not even really rational arguments. Just it almost showed this blind faith in the technological leaders and the companies. It was just like, dude, the convenience and the efficiency these companies give us, how dare you challenge them? And I found that response a little bit heartbreaking, but also fascinating.
One of the things I love doing is giving people permission. So rather than trying to sell people on an idea, you're doing things. It is open for them to potentially join. I've been involved with there's this concept called a distributed dance party, where there's a transmitter and a bunch of boom boxes, and you just go dancing through the streets, and people love it, but they get really freaked out. And they're like, "What are you doing? What are you selling?" I don't, we used to do them probably quarterly, and they're enormously fun, and you do get people off the street joining up. But this is the question: is what's it for? What's it about? What it's about is having fun and dancing in the street. And I'm an adult with a professional job, and I still think that's pretty awesome. You could too.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I think that inclusivity is so vital to communicate things in a language and in a way where people can be a part of it. And sorry to talk negative of Burning Man a little bit, but it seems that like the common response is like, "Oh, you just don't get it till you've gone." Sorry, just lost my thought. Sorry, I lost my thought on that. Shouldn't have. It was karma for having a go at Burning Man.
Even what you were saying about people saying, "Oh, what is all this about your dance party in the street?" One of the main things I say to people, and I explain to my interns and my volunteers when we're at the New Joneses, to say to people, I'm not selling you anything. And you just see people relax, like, oh, thank Christ, this is the first person I've interacted with most of my life that's not trying to sell me something. And that is one of the great things I think at Burning Man is you literally can't sell anything. You just, and I can't remember what the point was you were making earlier, Mick, but one thing that I love for all the cynicism, and I think it's good to have the cynicism because it is not this utopia, but what I do love about Burning Man is we live in this world where we're shown that we're meant to, you know, all the sort of, I think it's dying off now, the Gordon Gekko greed is good thing, but we still do have the Trumps and the people who are the money makers. That's our world still sort of tells us that's what we're meant to aspire to, even though we all know in our hearts that's bollocks. What I love about Burning Man is the utopia that we've created is a place where we are all equal and we can't buy and sell anything, and that's what we actually do hold up as this brilliant thing. If only we could achieve that. It's not a place where, and of course, you know, people go to Burning Man and some have their private jets and all that hoo-ha, but the idea of what we're trying to create is the perfect world would be we're all equal and we don't buy anything or sell anything from each other. We share our stuff and we hold that up as, thank God we still hold that up as the ideal.
I think that's a good place to finish off on. Please join me, a round of applause please for our panellists.